Welcome back to the Seraphine podcast. I am Seraphine Arocha, and this is Chelsea Atia. Hello, beauty. This has been so much fun. We are reviewing Halston, that is the Netflix miniseries. I think it's been so well done.
I completely agree.
It's probably one of my favorites. I'd watched like the Versace one that Ryan Murphy did. I liked it, but I didn't love it.
Yeah.
What I loved about it was it started out a little bit slow, but it allowed you to really get encompassed in his world.
Yes.
And then it really dove into the heart of this designer.
Yeah, it was very tragic towards the end. The last episode especially. I just felt like I got attached to him.
Yeah.
So to see his demise and to see him, like, everything unraveling, I felt like it tugged at my heartstrings a little bit, because I really felt for him. I know he's been through a lot in his life, and he got into some really bad stuff, and I think a lot of that time period was really dangerous to be partying, because HIV and AIDS was really, really going around a lot there in that time period. So
it was terrifying during that time. And I think, this episode is called Critics, and it's interesting because our culture now is so different. We literally have memes about, haters are going to hate, like don't, people who are critics are, the first one, to not bring something to the table.
Right.
And it's so different from this time period, to where literally people were waiting with bated breath for reviews, or journalism was king then. And I feel like he especially Halston felt a little bit like he had imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
Coming from where he did, being the small town guy. I mean, even his mom is referring to him as Halston.
Yeah.
And then he changes it to Halston.
Yeah.
He changes the cadence in his voice. He changes his hair, the color of his skin, to embody this very fashionable man about town. And it's exhausting. I mean, it's exhausting to keep up with the appearances. And I think that, he did have a good group around him. But I find parallels with his life, and also designers like, for instance, Alexander McQueen. I mean, he was somebody who, I've read so many books about him, and how he just came out with all this vision and had these amazing people around him. And then drugs, depression, death of again, mother figures and people in your life that it starts to eat away, and also being gay. I mean, and just, and not being quite at the point where you can even express that you're bisexual, because even then it was considered strange.
Halston never actually publicly came out as gay.
No.
He never did. So I think that's why Studio 54 was so attractive to people, because it made being gay cool.
Yeah.
It was like the first time that gay people could feel like themselves. They could be glamorous. People went there to watch the pretty gay boys dancing and stuff. So I think that's why it was so attractive to people, and also why it was kind of dangerous, because it was a nightlife scene and it got crazy in there. I had no idea. I've heard of Studio 54, of course, but I had no idea it was like that. I can't even imagine a club where people are just
having sex and doing cocaine and just, I mean, horses that are let in. I mean, the kind of debauchery that went in was nuts, and the excess. I think the problem with Studio 54 and why it imploded was everyone was trying to be free and trying to let go of their inhibitions, but they were doing it under this cloud of drugs and alcohol. And unfortunately, no matter what, even though it might make it easier to live in your truth with that, it still isn't your truth, because your brain is in this fog and haze. And then as soon as you step out the doors of Studio 54, I can only imagine the amount of depression and the way that you would feel of like, well, back to regular life.
Exactly. You know what's also crazy too, what we haven't talked about, is Studio 54 was so desirable for people that woman, she died in like the ventilation
system. And it was, I mean, they made a little cheeky remark that she died in her Calvin Kleins.
Yeah.
But I mean, it was literally a place that people would wait for hours on end. And I think it was, who was it? I think it's Rubel. I think it's Stephen Rubel, whoever the
owner.
Yeah, the owner of Studio 54. I mean, it was so corrupt. I mean, the money that was being laundered. There's so many great documentaries on Studio 54. If you ever want to just dive deep into this scene, I've always been just enamored with the 70s and 80s. I'm the type of person who I've seen Scarface and loved, you know, Elvira, Michelle Pfeiffer in her bangs and her, you know, disco chic outfit. I grew up on the Saturday Night Fever album. You know, for me, these are embedded in my childhood. I'm a little older than Chelsea, turning 44 on June the 1st. I'm like, oh my God, so crazy.
But Elvira though, like her style was very Halston.
Very Halston.
I'm wondering if she was wearing, was it the right?
It was like right at the time period.
I'm wondering if she wore Halston.
We'll have to look that up. Yeah. I'm pretty sure. I
was totally.
She was in the pantsuit. She was in the flowy stuff. I mean, she was
the low back like slip style gown.
Yep. Yes. She's like literally. I would see her on a Halston runway.
Yes.
So Studio 54. I mean, if you just Google Studio 54 documentaries. As we talk about this last episode, which really shows just the absolute denial of who Halston really is, because not only did he sell his namesake, but then he can't even be honest that he's contracted HIV.
Right.
And being completely dishonest and saying it's liver cancer, and even the moment with him and Liza Minnelli where he's saying, I'll be back, I'll come back, and he leaves. I mean, he goes to Southern California and basically just drives up and down the coast, spends time with his family, and dies very quietly.
Yeah, he died in San Francisco in 1990. People say that they saw him driving his convertible or something down the PCH.
Yeah. He's very tragically,
yes.
It's not, I mean, the romance in his life was so all over the place. He never really allowed himself to just surrender to love. Like even his moments with Liza, you can see there's this dance of like, they love each other, but it's not going to go into romantic love with Elsa. Elsa was completely enamored with him. Yeah. To the point
he was the only person that ever understood her, is what she said.
And he believed in her. Yeah. I mean, she's, you know, and up until this day, even though that they went their separate ways, you know, until she died, she was championing him. Yeah. And with the Halston documentaries that are out there, I would recommend, there's one literally called Halston. Most of them are on Amazon Prime. There's another one that's called Ultra Suede. And this one kind of turned me off within the first 15, 20 minutes because, you know, Liza Minnelli is one of the first interviews, and she sits down with the interviewer and she's like, I'm going to challenge you to not look for the scandalous. I'm going to ask you to really flesh out the story of who this man is, because it's so easy to go low.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. And I love that. Like, Liza is just so loyal to him. Yeah. Even like years after he passed away, even to this day, she's so loyal to him. And I love that kind of friendship. And I know that he appreciates her so much.
Definitely.
Still.
I mean, she is definitely, I've always loved Liza Minnelli, but this made me see her in so many different ways.
Me too. Yeah. I loved, like, just based off the character that played her, I can imagine that she's very similar to that, obviously. And just like the bubbly, happy, you know, even whenever she knew she had a problem, she knew she didn't want to go down the same path that her mom did. So she checked herself into rehab. And I just think that she had a good head on her shoulders, or has a good head on her shoulders. I think she's a loyal person. I really like her too, even more than I did.
It was a little mini love letter to her. I think it was very cool that I mean, because a lot of times people have made her kind of cartoonish with her
Yes.
marriages, almost like Elizabeth Taylor.
Exactly.
And you know what? I feel like if you live that grandiose of a life, I mean, you're going to have parts of your life that, you know, people will make fun of because they
Yeah.
will never, ever experience the kind of life she's lived. So many lives
Yeah.
within her life. It's
She
pretty
has.
cool. So then we have in this episode of Critics going back, Martha Graham, choreographer, brilliant in the world of ballet. She gives, you know, she has this relationship with Halston. They've been back and forth about him designing for one of her ballets.
Yeah.
And because under his contract, he can no longer be Halston. This was an opportunity for him to design.
Yeah.
And do something so amazing. And I loved the footage that they filmed to depict this defining moment. It's like it's pretty much one of his last moments of feeling like a designer and at the epitome of who he is with movement and flow.
Exactly.
It was so lovely.
And how the audience or the person wearing it should feel.
Yeah.
That's kind of how he started and got so successful. Is he really wanted to make the woman wearing his garments feel a certain way, almost like I was reading like a interview, and it was almost like a sensual experience, much like the perfume. It was, he wanted them to basically like get off to themselves wearing this, and that's what the interviewee said in his words. So I think that this was kind of taking it back to his original love for fashion and designing, and you saw him get teary-eyed watching it, and then the reviews came in.
Oh, and the reviews were just, I mean, just applauding him and the accolade. And he tries to believe, or he tries to make his friend Joe believe. And I love that scene that Joe actually picks him up after this horrendous argument. And Joe reads him back the reviews like he did so often in the past. And Halston's back is to him. And, you know, he's basically like, well, it's just reviews. You know, it is what it is.
He's playing it like low key.
Totally.
Like it's so nonchalant, but really he can wait to see what people said. And he imagined that they would say horrible things, but in fact it was all about him.
Yeah, it was really lovely. And I did like there was this kind of argument between Joe and Halston, and he used this kind of, he would say it a couple times to people who had designed in the theater world and kind of made it like an insult. And then lo and behold, really his garments are theatrical. They are like so elevated.
Yeah.
And I actually am a little sad. I'll be honest with you. I think the reason why it struck such a chord in me is because like Alexander McQueen is probably one of, to me, the last bastions of like just almost operatic clothes.
Yeah.
I mean, like his shows meant so much and they were so beautiful and there was a vision and it was almost like watching art come to life with thought, and they were so felt, like every photograph. And I feel like Halston, you know, in the beginning, with the way he would drape things, it was almost Grecian.
Yeah.
Like women were goddesses. And the story he loved to tell, which, you know, I think he got a little bit commercialized with, you know, how he was trying so hard to have like, you know, cameras around him all the time and depicting a certain way. But he did tell a beautiful story with women.
Yeah. I totally agree.
The last 3 episodes really make the series.
Yeah.
So if you're watching it and you're like, I don't know, just hang in there because it's so cool. It's so great to see these actors and actresses really bring it. And then, you know, the other thing is like, look up what the history of Halston. I mean, it's so interesting that Sarah Jessica Parker tried to bring it back with Halston heritage, but even even Sarah Jessica Parker couldn't bring it back to what it
Yeah,
was.
I don't think anyone can but Halston. So
No.
we're just gonna. I love that they brought this back to life again in a series, and now like we read that Netflix is doing like a partnership with Halston, and they're gonna all the gowns that are featured in this series are going to be for sale.
It's going to be like a capsule collection,
Yeah,
I think.
love that. And I think
so
that's so cool that Netflix is diving a little bit into the fashion industry. And I hope that they continue to make documentaries on the fashion houses.
Yes. Because clothes are so much a part of who we are.
Yes.
And I think that, it is so true when you think about the buying of clothing versus the putting it together and putting the scarf or the rings or the shape of things. I mean, it's like these are things that define who we want to present to the world.
Right.
And I love that it starts to get into us to where like you were just in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
And she described this moment like, oh yeah, me and my mom are shopping. And then you're pulled like a magnet to this one piece.
It really was. So my mom and I were looking for gowns for her, and it was like the light was shining on this dress, and I was like, this dress is beautiful. It was like very simple, minimalistic, but it had this on one shoulder. It had like a small like cape type, and it was yellow and it's beautiful. And I look at the tag and it's Halston. I'm like, what is this? I wanted my mom to buy it so badly. It wasn't her style, it was more mine. But yeah. I couldn't believe it. There wasn't very many dresses in this location, but the one dress that I picked was a Halston gown.
I love it.
So I think that was a little wink from him.
It is. You feel him in the air. I feel him. I do feel his inspiration in like designers like Tom Ford.
Yes, Givenchy and Saint Laurent.
Definitely.
They definitely like took a pin from him.
You definitely see it, and it's still alive and well. I see Gucci with a little bit in their flowy dresses, like when you see Florence and Florence from the Florence and the Machine in the designs. I definitely think he was unique, and I do believe that he was like, when we think definitively about someone who is a trailblazer and completely unique, he definitely was.
Totally. I'm a for sure Halston fan now, because I never really did much research on him before. I'd heard the name in fashion school and everything, but after watching the original documentary Halston on Amazon and then watching the series, I'm like, he is my style. I love his style so much. If he was like still alive today and designing for Halston, I would probably buy his designs for sure. Well, what's crazy too is, so in the Versailles, he had 12 black models, and which is kind of crazy because no other designer did that. No. So that's where like Givenchy and Saint Laurent, like they kind of took a cue from him on that, and they started having, they loved the idea of having different diversity in their models and stuff. But Halston designed gowns for the model.
Yes.
He didn't put the gown he designed on a model just for fit. He designed the gown for that specific model. Yes. Especially whatever article I was reading was talking about these specific models from the Versailles. Yeah. I can't remember their names, but
one of them was the gal from the Warhol gang, that she was very she's shapely, and she was I'm trying to think, we had talked about her earlier, and I loved the fact that he really did dress for all body types, and whether it was again, I don't know if it was in his head like intentional, like I'm going to have a plus size model or I'm going to have a black model. I just think that it was ingrained in his nature of, and especially that Studio 54 time period of like let's just live life, and I love celebrating that. So I guess if we're gonna give a review of this, it would totally be thumbs up.
2 thumbs up for sure. Watch it. It's number 10 on the Netflix popular, but I guarantee you it's going to be up in the top 5 soon.
For sure. I can't wait to see who's going to take the torch now with these fashion films.
I can't wait.
It's a lot of good stuff coming up. I know there's one about Gucci coming up. You'll be sure to hear me and Chelsea review it. Yes. We are loving all of this. I hope you loved our review and liked it. Please please give me your comments, your thoughts, your feelings about Halston. And if you have any good materials, because I know her and I will forever be now looking for those little nuggets to learn more about this amazing man and the designer we've grown to love.
I'm attached.
I love it. Thank you so much, and we'll see you later.